My friends, it's grand being with you tonight. I have a story I wanted to share with you. This concerns a commuter from Westchester County, New York. That's across from Manhattan. It's Republican territory. Every day, the gentleman goes down to the train depot, takes the train to New York City to work. He pays a quarter to the newsboy, takes a newspaper, opens to the front page, looks at it, folds it back up, gives it back to the newsboy. After several days of this, the young newspaper salesman got up enough courage to ask him what he's looking for. And he said, "I'm looking for the obituaries." And the young man said, "I'm sorry, sir, but the obituaries are on page 24. And the gentleman said, "The news I'm looking for is worth $1 million. The scoundrel I want to see dead will appear on page 1. I hope to disappoint him for many years. I had a letter the other day from a 12-year-old boy in Cuba. He said, "I have not seen a green $10 bill American. I'd like to have one. His name is Fidel Castro." During the election in 1932, Babe Ruth was asked how he could justify making more money per year than President Hoover. And the Babe replied, "I had a better season than he did." But on September 23rd, I addressed the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I said to them, "Well, here we are together again after 4 years. And what years they have been. You know, I am actually 4 years older, which is a fact that seems to annoy some people. In fact, in the mathematical field, there are millions of Americans who are more than 11 years older than when we started to clear up the mess that was dumped in our laps in 1933. So, with you tonight and this October evening, let us look back at what the New Deal has accomplished and where I believe work has yet to be done. I said in the campaign, the country demands bold, persistent experimentation. It's common sense to take an idea and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another, but above all, try something. Well, you know, sometimes I get bored sitting in Washington, listening to certain people talk and talk and talk about all the government should not be doing. I agree that people want a financially balanced budget, but they want the human budget balanced as well. The people of the United States are entitled to a government that thinks in terms of the people's needs. And those people who are constantly trying to derail useful government programs remind me of an unfortunate individual, some of your families may have one, that unfortunate individual of whom it is said he's enjoying bad health. And I better understand old Uncle Jed. Uncle Jed, said Ezra one day, "Bet you get a little hard of hearing." "Yeah," said Uncle Jed, "I'm afraid I'm getting a mite deaf." Whereupon Ezra made Uncle Jed go down to Boston and see an ear doctor. Jed came home. Ezra asked what happened. "Well," said Uncle Jed, "the doctor asked me if I had been drinking any. I said yes, I'd been drinking a mite. And then that doctor said to me, 'Jed, I might just well tell you right now, if you don't want to lose your hearing, you gotta give up your drinking.' And Uncle Jed said, 'I thought that over. And then I said, Doc, I like what I've been drinking so much better than when I've been a-hearing. I'm going to keep on getting deaf.'" Well, of course, another part of the New Deal concerns labor. When I was putting together my first cabinet, labor leaders around the country suggested several men to be Secretary of Labor. I, however, appointed Frances Perkins, the first woman to serve in the President's cabinet. Well, that appointment pleased my missus greatly. And the labor leaders gave me a hard time about the Perkins appointment, and one day my missus was sympathetic, and she said, "I must have had a bad hour with the labor leaders." And I said to her, "Oh, that's all right. I'd rather have trouble with them for an hour than with you for the rest of my life." Well, you remember what things were like for labor in 1932. You remember the closed banks, the bread lines, the starvation wages, the foreclosures, the bankruptcies, the closed factories, mines and mills, the ruined and abandoned farms, the utter impotence of the federal government. You remember when labor unions were considered almost un-American by certain individuals in our land, when employers sought to meet threatened strikes by demanding their government, federal and state, call out armed troops. Labor spies setting up private arsenals to ferret out and destroy members of the union. You remember the long, hard road with its gains and setbacks, which we've traveled together ever since those days. We've made progress, but we must continue to move forward. This government has committed itself to a definite program of the advancement of economic, industrial, and spiritual welfare of our people. And it began 1933 with the National Recovery Administration, the NRA, with Section 7A. It gave employees the right to collective bargaining and freedom of choice with respect to labor organizations. In 1934, the first National Conference on Labor Legislation was held. It formulated a program for raising labor standards, which commanded my wholehearted sympathy and approval of my administration. Standards to assure decent working conditions, safe and healthful places of work, adequate care and support when incapacitated by reason of accident, industrial disease, unemployment, or old age, adequate income, proper housing, elimination of child labor. Of course, this did not go unnoticed. In August of 1935, the American Liberty League was formed, made up of conservative Democrats aligned with right-wing Republicans, including well-known names, the DuPonts, Steelman Ernest Weir, Oilman J. Howard Pugh, Alfred Sloan, General Motors, Sewell Avery, Montgomery Ward. The League was supposedly nonpartisan, an educational organization designed to convince the public that New Deal measures that encouraged labor organization, promoted Social Security, provided for slum clearance and public housing, regulated business, and sought a more equitable distribution of national income through taxation was a conspiracy to subvert the Constitution and found a socialist or communist state. The Times newspaper reported the Wall Street regards the new American Liberty League as a direct answer from heaven to their prayer. You see what I have been up against. I have fought for the working man my entire political life. Senator Robert Wagner, and you know Bob Wagner, he helped set up the National Labor Relations Board. He and I were called communists and socialists when we served together in the New York State Legislature in 1910, when we were supporting then a 54-hour-a-week factory inspection and workman's compensation. During the campaign of 1936, I said in Madison Square Garden, "Tonight I call the roll of honor of those who stood with us in 1932 and stand with us today. Written on it are the names of millions who never had a chance, men at starvation wages, women in sweatshops, children at looms." My friends, we were not only up against political and industrial forces, but also judicial forces as well. The Supreme Court was systematically striking down every piece of major New Deal legislation. The Agricultural Adjustment Act, Railroad Retirement Act, National Recovery Act, Guffey-Cole Act, New York Minimum Wage Law. There seemed to be nothing we could do to help the industrial worker that would not be nullified as unconstitutional. We've been relegated to a horse and buggy definition of interstate commerce. Now, when the New York minimum wage law was nullified, all state minimum wage laws were nullified, and didn't the employers take advantage of that? They cut the wages. It was clearly brought to my attention, New Bedford, Massachusetts. While campaigning, my campaign car in '36 was mobbed by enthusiastic well-wishers, 20,000 in a space designed to hold 1,000. There was a girl 6 or 7 feet away. She was trying to pass an envelope to me. She was just too far away to reach. One of the policemen threw her back in the crowd, and I said to my driver, "Get the note from that girl." He got it and handed it to me, and this is what it said. "Dear Mr. President, I wish you could do something to help us girls. You are the only recourse we've got left. We've been working in our sewing factory, and up to a few months ago, we're getting our minimum pay of $11 a week. Today, the 200 of us girls have been cut down to $4 and $5 and $6 a week. You're the only man who can do anything about it. Please send somebody from Washington up here to restore our minimum wages because we cannot live on $4, $5, and $6 a week." And that's something we found in the campaign. Those people thought I had the power to restore things like minimum wages and maximum hours and elimination of child labor. And of course, I didn't have the power to do it. So I introduced my court reorganization bill. Some people call it a court packing bill. I call it a court retirement bill. Well, there was a bitter fight. But it resulted in a change in the Supreme Court's view, and they then upheld the Oregon minimum wage law, and Congress passed in response the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, and I did receive the power, and that act set minimum wages and maximum hours for both men and women. The minimum wage law is here to stay, and it must be regularly increased to maintain a living wage. And by living wage, I mean a wage which will ensure the worker and the worker's dependents a living in accordance with American standards of decency, happiness, and self-respect. The wage earners of America do not ask for more. They will not be satisfied with less. And what has the New Deal accomplished? Guaranteed collective bargaining, minimum wage, maximum 40-hour week, time and a half for overtime, unemployment compensation, bank deposit insurance, Social Security, child labor laws, saving homes and farms from foreclosure. And you may recognize many of those programs have fulfilled the goals of the 1934 Conference on Labor Legislation. But we must be vigilant against those who opposed us on every one of those measures and who continue to oppose our efforts to help the working men and women of this country. In 1936, I said in a campaign concerning the Republican Party, "Let me warn you, and let me warn the nation against the smooth evasion which says, of course we believe in all these things. We believe in Social Security. We believe in work for the unemployed. We believe in saving homes. Cross our hearts and hope to die. We believe in all these things. But we do not like the way the present administration is doing them. Just turn them over to us. We will do all of them. We will do more of them. We will do them better. And most important of all, the doing of them will not cost anybody anything." My friends, you cannot promise to repeal taxes before one audience and promise to spend more of the taxpayers' money before another audience. Here's my principle. Taxes should be levied according to the ability to pay. That's the only American principle. You do not increase the purchasing power of the people by cutting the taxes for the wealthy. That's right. Voters have to choose in an election between democracy in taxation and special privilege in taxation. Now, there are two theories of prosperity and of well-being. The first theory is, if we make the rich richer, somehow they will let a part of their prosperity trickle down to the rest of us. The second theory is, if we make the average of mankind comfortable and secure, their prosperity will rise upward through the ranks. You know where I stand. Since I have been your president, your government has had but one sign on its desk: seek only the greater good for the greater number of Americans. And the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, it is whether we provide enough to those who have too little. We all know certain people who make it a practice to depreciate the accomplishments of labor. They usually keep this up for 3 years and 6 months in a row. But then, for some strange reason, they change their tune every 4 years just before Election Day. But you know, even those candidates who burst out in election year affection for social legislation for labor in general still think you ought to be good boys and stay out of politics. And above all, they hate to see any working man or woman contribute a dollar bill to any wicked political party. Of course, it's all right for large financiers and industrialists and monopolists to contribute tens of thousands of dollars. It has been well said, the most dreadful failure of which any form of government can be guilty is simply to lose touch with reality, because out of this failure, all imaginable forms of evil grow. Every empire that has crashed has come down primarily because its rulers did not know what was going on in the world and were incapable of learning. It is for that reason that our American form of government will continue to be safest in democratic hands. The real, actual, undercover Republican leadership is always the same. That leadership will never comprehend the need for a program of social justice and of regard for the well-being of the masses of our people. And toward that well-being, I outlined my annual message on the State of the Union in 1943, an economic Bill of Rights, under which a new basis of security and prosperity can be established for all, regardless of station, race, or creed. And these rights are the right to a useful, remunerative job in the industries or shops or farms or mines of the nation, the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation, the right of every farmer to sell and raise his products at a return which will give him and his family a decent living, the right of every businessman, large and small, to trade in an atmosphere of freedom from unfair competition and domination by monopolies at home or abroad, the right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care and opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health, the right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment, and the right to a good education, an economic Bill of Rights. These rights spell security. We must be prepared to move forward in the implementation of these rights to new goals of human happiness and well-being. Well, the cause of labor has traveled forward over a long road beset with difficulties. We can look back with a sense of accomplishment. Much of the progress has been due to one thing this administration from the very beginning has insisted upon: the assurance to labor of the untrammeled right, not privilege, but the right to organize and bargain collectively with its employers. And yet we know our work is not done. My administration will continue its efforts on behalf of labor, as I believe the welfare of labor is the welfare of all. The interest of the businessman is bound to the interest of every wage earner. Whether he's running a store on the corner or a stockholder in a corporation, big or little, he's financially better off when wages and working conditions are good than when wages and working conditions are poor. Surely the last panic proved that. It's the real advantage of every producer, every manufacturer, and every merchant to cooperate in the improvement of working conditions, because the best customer of American industry is the well-paid worker. And the best guarantee of corporate dividends is a rising standard of living. Well, the road to our labor goals is not easy, will not be easy. There has been and always will be selfish interest in partisan politicians who will attempt to check or weaken whatever we do. But I am confident that united we shall prevail and shall create a new vision for America, for when there is no vision, the people perish. Today, in our boasted modern civilization, we are facing a conflict between two schools of philosophy. One of them is the philosophy of those who would let things alone. The other is the philosophy that strives for something new, something the human race has never attained and will attain: social justice through social action. The philosophy of letting things alone has resulted in the jungle law of the survival of the so-called fittest. The philosophy of social action results in the protection of humanity and the fitting of as many human beings as possible into the scheme of surviving. My philosophy of social justice through social action calls definitely, plainly for the reduction of poverty, for the reduction of the causes of poverty. We tried to pass the Workmen's Compensation Act in New York in 1911, and the courts declared it unconstitutional. So we had to go and amend the Constitution, and the following year we got a Compensation Act. The state of New Jersey, at the bidding of Governor Woodrow Wilson, passed a Compensation Act in 1910. As a result, all across the country, states have passed compensation acts and have eliminated that cause of poverty. Not long ago, hundreds of thousands of crippled children who could get no adequate care were lost to their communities and a burden to them. In later years, we came to the conclusion that carting off people to the poorhouse was not the best thing. I was sold on old age insurance and pensions when two brothers and a sister in their 80s in my town of Hyde Park, New York, were taken to the poorhouse. The sister to an insane asylum just for being old and in poverty. I have a letter here from a woman in Michigan, 1934. Dear Mrs. Roosevelt, I'm writing to ask of you to help me and my old father to live. I'm in a farm which he owns and has planted or farmed all he was able to do. We haven't any stock, nothing to feed them until his corn is through growing. We have a few chickens. This is what I would like to ask of you and the President. If I could have a small pension each month so we would not starve. My father is 76. He's too old to work at the Atrium Furnace Company. I can't go away and leave him alone to look for work, and to stay here in such poverty, I'm so disturbed trying to know what to do. I think you and the big boss, meaning our president, will understand. I understood. If poverty is to be prevented, we require a broad program of social justice. I said in 1932, we cannot go back to the asylums, the lack of hospitals and public health, the sweatshops, the children in factories. Those days are gone. It is not a question of not going back. It is a question of not standing still, and the New Deal has not stood still. Personally, for me, it was the creation of the March of Dimes to aid the crippled children. For the nation, it has been Social Security to protect people in old age, unemployment compensation to protect the worker from poverty between jobs, bank deposit insurance to protect the general public's money from bank failure. These programs will help prevent any future economic crisis from falling as far and ruining as many people as did the Great Depression. Some of our problems cannot be solved in the long run without the help of everybody. So, my friends, I leave you with these final thoughts. The period of social pioneering is only at its beginning. And make no mistake about it, the same qualities of heroism and faith and vision that were required to bring the forces of nature into subjection will be required in even greater measure to bring under proper control the forces of modern society. There is a task which for importance and magnitude calls for the best you and I have to offer. We need leadership, of course. We need leadership of people who are honest in their thinking and honest in their doing. We need leadership if it is straight thinking and unselfish. But in the last analysis, we must have the help of men and women, all the way from the top to the bottom, especially men and women who believe in the school of philosophy which is not content to leave things alone. And so in these days of difficulty, we Americans everywhere must and shall choose the path of social justice, the only path that will lead us to a permanent bettering of our civilization, the path that our children must tread and their children must tread, the path of faith, the path of hope, and the path of love toward our fellow man. In regard to our problems, in regard to every problem that arises, there are counselors these days who say, do nothing. Other counselors who say, do everything. Common sense dictates an avoidance of both extremes. I say to you, do something. And when you've done something, if it works, do it some more. And if it does not work, then do something else. I call upon all of you to play your part. And however large or small our part may be, we can all feel with Theodore Roosevelt, who said many years ago, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumphs of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither defeat nor victory. So today we celebrate one who fought in that arena, whose children's crusade fought against child labor, and was called the miner's angel, fighting to organize miners to achieve better working conditions. She had dreams. To those of you gathered here, if regardless of your years, you are young enough in spirit to dream dreams and see visions, dreams and visions about a greater America that is to be, if you are young enough in spirit to believe that poverty can be greatly lessened, that the disgrace of involuntary unemployment can be wiped out, that class hatreds can be done away with, that peace at home and abroad can be maintained, and that one day a generation may possess this land blessed beyond anything we now know, blessed with all those things, material and spiritual, that make our lives abundant. If that is the fashion of your dreaming, then I say, hold fast to your dream. America needs it. In a few days, the nation votes again. When you enter the voting booth, look over the names on the ballot. Pick those who are known for their experience and their liberalism. Pick them for what they have done, and not just for what they say they might do. And one last but important word: pick them without regard to race, color, or creed. My friends, good night.